I've been so looking forward to this conversation. This is a topic that I'm so excited to bring more attention to and share about. It's kind of a hidden modality that I'm really excited to have you talk about. So, welcome, Dr. Shea.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm so grateful that we're connected. My neighbor said, you have to meet this woman. She helps women in the fertility space, among other individuals. And when I met you, you know, you you really care and have such a gift as a chiropractor who specializes in something called Network Spinal, which we'll dive into.
Hmm.
So thank you for being here and having this conversation with us.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm excited. It's been a long time
Yeah,
coming.
I know we've been like talking about it and
Yeah.
rescheduling, rearranging. You have two little ones, and
Hmm.
with my daughter too, who you've also supported. You've helped me
Yeah.
and my daughter. So I personally have experience seeing you, which I
Hmm.
think really matters too. You know,
Hmm.
having these conversations, I like to speak to people who I have personally experienced their work as well.
Yeah, totally.
And yeah, share a little bit about you. I know you've been a chiropractor since 2016.
Hmm.
And I'm curious if you can lead us through just a little bit of your background and what led you to the work that you're doing.
Hmm. Yeah, it's really funny because I before I got into chiropractic, I was actually a strength and conditioning coach. So I
Yeah.
was in the athletic space pretty heavily, training athletes on the collegiate level. And I moved out to California from the East Coast and wanted to continue my education. I was like, there's some other things that I really want to dive into. And I thought maybe it was some physical therapy, and did some interning, and it just wasn't exactly what I was looking for.
Mm,
And I was doing a running clinic and met a couple of chiropractors who came to my running clinic. And I went over to their office and chatted with them, and they were telling me about the philosophy of chiropractic. And I was like, oh, wow, this actually sounds pretty and aligned with what I'm looking for. And at
mm,
the time, I'd grown up with chiropractic, but I hadn't actually known like the foundation and the philosophy behind it. And I don't think many people do, because chiropractic is actually the philosophy of the body knows how to heal itself. It just needs
mm,
no interference. And that most chiropractors, well, all chiropractors have a very, very heavy education in the nervous system.
mm,
And, just because of the history of chiropractic in the world and in the United States, we've become pain and back doctors. And so we'll kind of debunk that a little today. But anyways,
yeah.
I met them and they were like, why don't you come listen to the president of the school speak and all this? And I was like, all right, that sounds great. And I did. And I think within 6 months, I started school, moved up to the Bay Area and started school. And at that time, I wanted to be a sports chiropractor. I was like, I'm going to be on the sidelines.
Mm,
I was
mhm,
helping with the rugby team, just like really wanting to do all of that. But, behind the scenes, I struggled with anxiety,
mm,
depression, and kind of just this like back and forth, hyper vigilant into just like complete shutdown pretty much since I can remember. And a friend of mine was like, why don't you go see this network spinal chiropractor?
mm,
And I'm like, okay. And I really dove in and was like, okay, I'm going to commit. And within 6 months, everything was shifting for me. I had a lot of
mm.
emotion come up, as you know, like
Yeah.
there was a lot of tears,
Yeah.
and I had to move through that. But I started to have a different relationship with my anxiety that I was experiencing, with stress, with
Mm,
life. And I sat back one day and was like, you know what? This is where I need to be. And
mm,
I really shifted gears into doing what I do now, which is network spinal, a very gentle tonal, what we call tonal technique, which works on looking at the tone and tension and shape of the nervous system, and why that is the way it is, and how can
mm,
we help support the body in releasing those tension patterns so that it can live more freely. And that was so in alignment with the way that I grew up and what I was looking for. So I
mhm.
landed there.
And what year was that when you learned about this technique?
I want to say right after I started school, so probably early 2013.
Okay, so it's been around for quite a while.
It has since the 80s is when it started,
Okay.
and it has
Okay.
morphed and changed
Hmm.
into the structure of what it is now. Yeah.
Yeah. So when you became a chiropractor, did you dive right into this specialty immediately? Was this what you?
Yeah, yeah. Even though I
Okay.
went in with a sports mindset, I shifted very quickly. I think within six
Mm.
months of that initial care for myself, did I start to
Hmm.
see how powerful this was and that it was something I really wanted to be involved with.
Hmm.
Mhm. And then, after I started, I've always had a soft spot for just the pregnancy and the motherhood space.
Yeah.
Um, but before I became a mom, I was a little bit more on the entrepreneur side, really helping people really shift and grow their mindset and transform. And
Mm.
as I started to move towards motherhood and some of the struggles, which I'll share later, that I have had, I really started to dive more into helping moms and or want to be moms um,
Hmm.
really support their bodies, support their mindset into and help them really prepare for whatever motherhood journey they are on.
Mm. That's so beautiful. Yeah.
Mhm.
I mean, you and I align. You're in the holistic space,
Yeah.
talking about aligning the mind, the body, the spirit, our emotional center. And the goal really is to help us live more fluidly, right? To help
Mhm.
us adapt, excuse me, to the stressors in our life.
Mhm.
And fertility challenges, they're no joke.
Yeah.
They often put us in kind of this fight or flight, freeze kind of state.
Mhm.
And the work you're doing that I believe in so much, I mean, it is helping us regulate our nervous system. And I'd love for you to just kind of, share a bit. And I do write about it in my book with the nervous system and regulation. It's so key to address this core root issue. Can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah. It's interesting. In preparation for the podcast, I was also just
Yeah.
doing some research to see what's out there right now. Like what are they
Yeah.
doing in terms of research with
Yeah.
fertility, infertility, stress, and I've come across some really like just like some very like polar opposite
Yeah.
perspectives,
Conflicting.
very conflicting. Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
As you said, I have two young boys, so my brain is not always as sharp
It's
as it
okay.
has
I
been.
got my coffee too.
Totally.
Early.
um, but yeah, I came across some conflicting information, and my belief has always been that it makes sense to me that when Bruce Lipton actually he looks at epigenetics, right? And so he really looked at two types of cells and saw that the cells could not be in survival state. They could not be in that like just fight or flight, like about to not, maybe not going to survive state and grow
Mhm.
at the same time.
Mm.
And so I really took that into the space of fertility and was like, well, that makes sense. If you are under high levels of stress, then your body, is really saying, I'm trying to survive. I can't sustain another life and grow something right now. And so that was really the story that I went with. And it's
Mm.
very educated story.
Yeah.
um, but then I'm reading about famines and wartime and the fact that we have not gone extinct, right? Because
Mm.
that cannot be the only marker for fertility, because there were women under very high levels of stress during famines and during, recessions and wartime who were still conceiving children.
Mm.
Um, and so I was like, you know, well, then what is the truth here? And I still don't really know the full answer. And I'm going to keep asking and searching in that aspect. But what I
Yeah.
can say is with a lot of confidence is that stress will make it more challenging for us to
Mhm.
conceive. And what they did see in stressful times was that the babies actually had higher levels of cortisol as their baseline for women who were in some of those stressful experiences that I
Mhm.
mentioned.
Mhm.
And that is because the nervous system is so beautifully designed, and the baby is picking up on mom's environment, mom's hormones throughout the entire pregnancy.
Mhm.
And it is telling the baby how to prepare for life outside, right?
Mm.
And so, either way, whether stress affects fertility or not, we know it affects pregnancy. We know it affects the next generation. And so, I think no matter what, it is an important topic to discuss, because
Yeah.
if it can help with fertility, amazing.
Yeah.
If it can help with the quality of the pregnancy and then the life of these children that we're bringing into the world, then it's a topic that needs to be discussed when it comes to fertility and motherhood.
Yeah, I love that this starts with us, right?
Hmm.
This is an opportunity for us to step in, to be open to some of these healing modalities, these alternative forms of medicine, to allow us to support our nervous system,
Hmm.
which it affects our little ones that we're calling in, that we are carrying and beyond. These are skills that support us, yes, hopefully to become pregnant, to create the space to relax. And I'll let you explain because you can educate us more on this technique. But really, it's such a gentle practice and helping us release where we might be stuck and help us move through, uh, as you describe, these tension patterns. Can you share a bit more on, like, you're looking at fascia, you're looking at these gentle uh, hand placements that you do, and I've experienced it. It's like really magical. I mean, for anyone listening, they're like, okay, what is this? Like, can you give some examples of like concrete, like, okay, this is what a session kind of looks like, and how I'm supporting a woman or a man individual through this
Hmm.
process?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I started doing my classes once a month to
Yeah,
help my practice members really understand what's going on,
yeah.
because it is quite magical, and it is
Mm-hmm.
very science based as well. And
Mm-hmm.
that's my juice. I love science, and so the fact that I have both magic
Yeah,
and science
yeah,
at the same time feels so exciting,
yeah.
to my nervous system. But yeah, Network Spinal, it was created as a gentle technique to, like I said before, like help moving those tension patterns through the nervous system. And I'll just take a step back and say that, when we look at what chiropractors would call subluxation, or if I'm looking at tension patterns in the nervous system, they are created by generally three different things: physical stress, chemical stress, and emotional stress.
Mm,
And I would even add a fourth, which is spiritual stress. And I think that those four really play a big key part in how our nervous system sees the world. And so,
mm,
like I've just mentioned, it starts when you're in the belly. It starts before that, because grandma made your eggs, and we are vibration, right? So here's where
mm-hmm.
people may think it gets a little woo woo, but it's science. You can look it up. We are mostly vibration,
Yes.
and only about 1% matter. And so if you think about the egg that grandma made, it's a vibration. And so where she was at when she created those puts an imprint into your genetics,
Mm,
into your makeup. Then mom and dad, and what was happening for them. And that is how your nervous system starts to be wired. So it literally starts
mm.
way before you were even a twinkle in the eye.
Yeah.
And then as soon as you are born, your birth process, which I work with a lot with people and with children. And then as you grow, your whole life experience, things that happened, as Gabor Mate said, the things that didn't happen, which is a
Mm.
huge key thing as well. Because we look, a lot of people say, I feel like I've had so much trauma in my life, like the way that I respond in my nervous system. And all I can remember is a really beautiful childhood. And it's
Interesting.
sometimes, yeah, it's very interesting. And I'm actually one of those people. I had severe anxiety, and my parents are two of my best friends. But
Huh.
what I looked at later and found out was they were also very young. They were about 21 when I was born. My mom they were struggling to survive, struggling to make ends meet. My dad had to, I remember one Christmas, he's an electrician. Now he's an electrical contractor, like owns his own company.
Yeah.
But he used to have to go get wire out of his truck to make the hangers for the ornaments, because
Oh my gosh.
he didn't even want to
Yeah.
buy them from the store.
Mm.
And so
Mm.
when I look at those things, I imagine the stress that my parents were under, and realize that there was probably a few times that I wasn't emotionally attuned to in the way that I needed as a child, because
Mm.
they were distracted by trying to help us eat.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think, and I hold nothing against them because that's what they needed to do. That was the most important part. But when we look at our history, that's reality, right? It's like the things that also didn't happen and when we were not attuned to, when our
Mhm.
parents couldn't hold us emotionally in our bigness, when we weren't validated. Hey, those, like, it's okay to be feeling that way. All of those make these imprints in our nervous system. And I'm
Mhm.
touching on this because it's really important to realize that it's not just I woke up today and my neck hurts.
Mm.
It
Yeah.
is a history of how we deal with stress, how we adapt. Did we learn to be people pleasers? Did we learn to ignore our own needs at the expense of our health? Did we learn to,
Mm.
like, be a perfectionist, and that was the way that we were going to be loved? Like, these things tell our nervous system what is safe and what is not in our environment, and how we need to operate to be a part of the tribe. And that's what our nervous system is all about. And it creates tension patterns in our bodies in order to help us survive. So they're adaptive. This is an adaptive thing. It's not a
Mhm.
bad thing. Your body's doing its best possible to
Yeah.
help you stay, surviving. And how we
Safe.
do that as
Yeah.
humans,
Right.
right, is
Yeah.
through community. And so that's why
Mm.
we have all these adaptive ways of being in relationship, and they create tension patterns in the nervous system. Of course, there is the physical, like I mentioned, which is like day to day stuff. Are you playing tennis in the same side, or that golf swing, or hairstylists I see all the time, right? Like
Oh, yeah.
dental hygienists. Like, you have to
Yeah.
think about all the different types of work that people are
Yep.
doing, these repetitive
Yep.
movements.
Yep.
There's acute injury, and then all the things I just talked about are emotional stressors, right? There
Mhm.
can be spiritual stressors where we've had trauma around religion, or we just had a disconnection from God or source or universe, whatever everybody
Yep.
loves to call it, whatever that
Yep.
higher power is for
Yep.
all of us. As well as the chemical, which is also something I dive into with my patients who are trying to conceive, which is, we are, as women, we're exposed to over 200 chemicals a day. Over
Mm.
100 of them are before we leave the house, because we put on all of our beauty products.
Mm.
And we clean the kitchen and we do all these things. So it's our cleaning supplies, it's our beauty products, our lotions, our shampoos,
Yeah.
everything, our deodorants. And all of these things are chemical stressors, and they can be neurotoxins. They can be things that irritate our nervous system, bog down our organs. And so those are the things that I look at, and that is what creates tension in our nervous systems. And so when I work with someone, that's what I look at. I take a very deep history and I start to see where have they been exposed to chemical. Like, I even go as far as smelling them. Like, I notice how
Mm.
they smell when they come in, because if they wear a lot of perfume, like, what are they putting on their body? And I can get a
Yeah.
pretty good snapshot of what they are using in their home based on that. I talk about, what is your job? What's your history like? What's your relationship with your parents like? I
Yeah.
even ask them about their birth if they know. And based on that, we see where the tension patterns are in their spine. We know that upper neck cervical is around the brainstem. So we see a lot of hypervigilance there. We see a lot of control survival mechanism when I see a lot of tension there. So each different levels of the nervous system also have consciousness around them about what's kind of happening in their life. I say that the spine is kind of your autobiography, of what happened in
Mm.
your life and throughout your experiences.
I remember that intake form was really thorough. I appreciated that.
Mm-hmm.
Going back to the chemical part real quick, I'm really curious. So hormone disruptors are a big thing in the fertility space. And how do you identify if it is a chemical tension pattern, I guess, in the body? Is it more through the questionnaire with individuals, or can you actually, like, how do you sense into that, I guess, through tension
There's
in the spine?
actually,
I'm
yeah,
curious about that.
there is actually a specific feeling of the tissue around the
Really?
spine. Yeah,
Okay.
I tend to see, this can happen with cortisol as well, but I tend to see, like, what I this term I use, some people are like, oh, I know exactly what you mean. Others like, what? I call it boggy.
Oh.
There is this, like, there is this feeling that's kind of spongy and boggy. And a lot of times I see it around the kidneys is
Ah,
often. And I see that with high levels of cortisol too, because the adrenals are there. And also up here in that transitionary place in the neck, there's this, yeah, there's
interesting.
what I call chemical tone. And there's a specific feeling of it that I can feel in the spine that can give me some hints, and this isn't to the thing that we have to remember is that it's always a combination of things, right? Very
Mm,
rarely, unless it's very significant or severe, is it one thing.
mhm.
And if we are modern humans living in this modern world, there is some chemical going on just leaving our house, right?
Yeah.
um but yeah, there's a specific tone in the body, and then that with like smelling, if they come in with heavy perfumes, and then in the questionnaire. And sometimes I'll
Yeah.
ask them too, like, do you use plastic products? Because I'm sure, in the fertility space and infertility, those are
Mm,
massive hormone disruptors. So,
mm. Yeah, thank you for touching on that. I just
mhm,
was curious, like how exactly you tune into that. That's so fascinating.
mhm,
So when I've experienced a session with you and have observed even some of your videos when you show working with clients, it looks like you're not doing a lot. Like people would look at your, from afar and be like, okay, there's no twisting, real popping. You can do those adjustments, but this
mhm,
technique, it's so subtle. I mean, you really have to have skilled hands and you're sensing, I'm sure, throughout your whole body, not just through your hands.
mhm.
Can you share just a little bit of what a session looks like? Um, just to give people a taste of, assessing the spine. And I know you're kind of looking for that gentle flow, if I'm not mistaken.
Mhm.
Can you explain? Yeah.
Yeah, explain what I'm looking for and kind of
Yeah.
just what I'm
Yeah.
doing. Yeah, yeah.
How our body's adapting and how
Yeah.
you know that there's a response in maybe a positive way, or
Mhm,
when you see things that, okay, this is just not moving, right?
mhm, mhm. Yeah, that's a really great question. So one of the things that I am looking for is, number one, identifying the tension pattern, right? And then once I identify that, I usually work in two areas. And I'm sure on this podcast, you guys have touched on parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system quite a bit. But the parasympathetic is where we're in rest and digest. It's where we can recover, where our body can
Hmm.
recuperate.
Yeah.
And that should be our baseline. I always think of a cat. This is so our baseline should be them like chilling around the house, and
Yeah.
then that sympathetic is they saw a mouse outside and they're like, let me out, let me out, let me out. Right. And they go
Hmm.
for their hunt. And so I work in the neck and the sacrum mostly because that is where the majority of those parasympathetic nerve roots lie, where
Hmm.
the majority of our sympathetic are in, right behind, or right along the rib cage in our thoracic spine. And then there's a mixture in the lumbar spine. So I make contacts on the sacrum or the neck. And what I'm looking for, this is a really cool thing. A lot of modalities look at what's wrong. And I identify the tension patterns, yes. And we talk about what is wrong.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
when I'm looking to assess where I'm going to make what we call a gentle contact, I'm looking for something called a gateway. And a gateway is, if there's an area of tension, there's usually a really small space that has ease and opening.
Hmm.
And I've been trained to find it. Obviously, it is very subtle, and there is a structural piece that I'm looking for, but there's also this energetic piece that like kind of sucks you in and is like, oh, welcome. And
Hmm.
that is a place that the body is finding peace. And so what I'm looking for is a place that's already working in the body, and
Hmm.
that just like makes me feel so excited,
Yeah.
because what that does is we make the contact into that space, and it sends information through the nervous system into the prefrontal cortex, the brain here behind the forehead. And then the prefrontal cortex can now find that area. A lot of times with stress or tension patterns, there does become a disconnected dissociation between the brain and that area, which is why it's not self-regulating tension patterns.
Hmm.
So what this work does is helps the brain find that area again and decide if it needs that tension or it doesn't anymore.
Um,
And most of the time it says it doesn't. If you have massive amount of stress in your life, or something still showing up that your body feels it needs to protect, it's not going to release that. This isn't something that is forceful. This is you getting to decide. All I do is come in and just say, hey, look at this space, like look at this spot, and the
mhm.
brain can find it. And now what that does is it helps to introduce what's called at the beginning of care a respiratory wave. And it looks like a wave of breath. And that's why
Mm.
it's named what it is. Um, but what it tells me is, it'll start and kind of come through the lumbar spine. Maybe next visit, it comes up through the thoracic spine. And eventually, what I want to see is it rocks the sacrum all the way up to the base of the skull. And so that's what I'm looking for, is this really smooth respiratory wave throughout the entire spine. And that tells me that the brain can find all the levels of the spine and help it self regulate those tension patterns and bring more ease to the
Mm.
area, bring safety to the nervous
Mm.
system. It brings a sense, it kind of takes you out of that survival mechanism and helps kick in that parasympathetic nervous system.
Thank you. That's really helpful.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like you said, creating these openings for
Mm-hmm.
healing in the body
Mm-hmm.
and tuning into what is working, right? I
Mm-hmm.
like that.
Exactly. Yep.
And so some of the conditions that you've supported women with, yes, pain, chronic pain, anxiety, depression, and fertility, right? It affects multiple areas of our life. And often we can feel stuck in a lot of areas, feeling like, what do I have control over? This is an area where it's such a gift for the body, for your, I would like to say your soul. Like it's
Mm-hmm.
so nourishing to tap into a modality that does give you a sense of that calm within that you might be searching for if you're on this path feeling like so frazzled, scattered, like disconnected really from your body.
Mm-hmm.
Have you worked with women who come to you where they're in this kind of unregulated state often? Is this something you see quite often?
All the time.
All the time? All the
All the
time.
time.
Yeah.
I was just writing a blog about how our lives, our stressful lives are probably not going to change, and our environments are not always going to change, or we don't have control over them. But what we do
Mhm.
have control over is the way that we can respond to stress.
Exactly.
And while I was doing that, I found a very startling survey. And just last year, they surveyed millennials specifically. And then I think that, was it Gen X is the next one, or Gen Z? No, Gen Z.
Okay.
But millennials, 64% of millennials reported feeling stressed all the time,
Oh my gosh.
all
Oh
the
my.
time.
Oh my gosh.
Right. And then you can imagine probably another who knows how much percent feel it often.
Yeah.
And it was about the same for Gen Z. And so
Oh.
I obviously see this all the time. And I actually I have two practice members right now going through IVF.
Mm.
And one of them having a far, this is her second time. She already has a beautiful child,
Mhm.
a far less stressful experience. And then one who is having a far more struggling experience. And I actually passed her book along to you just a couple of days
Oh,
ago,
thank
or to
you.
her a couple of days ago.
Yeah.
Yep. And just to see the difference for me was very eye opening, in terms of
Mm.
how stressful this can really be. And just seeing like this, not just the stress of the infertility, but the stress of just life in general, and then navigating
Yeah.
all of it,
Yeah.
and the schedule that you have to be on with the hormones and the
Oh
things,
yeah.
and right, all of that. And so yesterday, that's specifically what we worked around was, how can we create a structure for you on paper, and then how can we support you in between those moments of doing, to
Mm.
really just sit back and have faith, right?
Yeah.
To give the
Yeah.
nervous system a little bit of a break, to
Mhm.
say, okay, I'm going to also have, God or spirit, I'm going to hand some of this off to you so that I don't have to hold it all.
Yeah. Yeah.
And she walked out so much lighter, just being like, yeah,
Mm.
I can do that, just like this very small piece. But yeah, I see it all the time, all ages, all genders, and I
Mm.
do find that this fertility space is very stressful, for women, because it's motherhood. And of course you want to experience that. And I think
Yeah.
too, we have this level, this question of like you said, like, what can I control? What can I can't? Is there something wrong with my body or me? Did I do something
Mm.
down the road that caused this? And all of those guilts and shames and stressors that we hold as women can really take a toll on our mental health and well-being.
Mm. 100%. I'm having so many thoughts as you're talking. I'm like, that's shocking to hear the statistic with how many people are just stressed to the max and how sad. And I don't want to think, the future, right? With kids, it's like that stress is going to be imprinting on their future children.
Exactly.
Oh my gosh. Let's turn this around. Let's turn that. And it's like just giving people some simple techniques and tools. And one of the other areas you've supported me with, some somato respiratory integration techniques, right? With
Mhm.
just like breathing and focusing our attention on something and kind of just, there's a lot of healing techniques out there that if
Mhm.
people are open to it, we can stay empowered to support our well-being.
Yeah,
Do you have any comments
absolutely.
on that
Yeah.
technique?
Yeah, I mean, I use that technique and also just things that I've like learned and picked up along the way.
Yeah.
I usually tell practice members that about 50% of the work actually happens with me on the table. We, before we start, I really try to get a yes and a commitment to the journey, because
Hmm.
I think often we're very used to just like going in and just laying down and receiving a massage. And that is absolutely beautiful. It's one of my favorite things to do and to learn to
Yeah.
receive that. My work is more of a team effort,
Hmm.
because rewiring the nervous system takes consistency.
Mm.
And so that is one of the biggest things that I do with every practice member is, okay, what can we also have you be doing on the outside on a daily basis when you're actually in the triggers, when you're in the stressors,
Yeah.
right? Not
Yeah.
just in here having, your 30 minutes of self-care time, but when you're really in the trenches, like what can we do to help you move that needle? And so that is one of my favorite things to do with practice members. And I try to make things really doable because, like I said, I'm a mom of two. I run a business, and I have to say, I find that sometimes I don't do the things that I ask my patients to do.
Mm.
And I thankfully I have a really supportive partner who will call me out on that and be like, "What would you tell a patient right now?" And I'm like, "Thank you." um, but because of that, and
Mm.
I understand stress, I understand crazy lifestyles, I understand managing what feels like 20 people's schedules, and
Wow. Mm.
it needs to be doable. So
Yeah.
somato respiratory integration was created to as a sister technique, and also separate. It's also very beautiful on its own.
Hmm.
um, and it is exactly what it sounds like. It's body and breath and its integration
Yeah.
to help our brain and body come into more coherence. And coherence is this really beautiful term that I love and use very
Mm.
often. And incoherence is like if you were sitting down and to see the Colorado Symphony, and you're sitting there and you're like, this sounds weird. And you realize that either they're all playing different songs or they
Mhm.
all open to a different page, or
Mm.
one's playing at 64 beats a minute and one's playing at 85.
Yeah.
And I was a
Yeah.
classically trained musician, so I love
Oh,
this
wow.
is like my a great way to explain it. And there's incoherence, there's like you
Mm.
don't really know what's going on. And then you sit down for the next song and they got themselves together. And now everybody is playing in
Mm.
beautiful, everyone's in tune, everyone's playing at the same tempo, the same song, same page, same note. And it just sounds absolutely incredible. And it gives you those goosebumps and those chills, right?
Mm.
That's coherence.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
when we have coherence in our own nervous system,
Mm.
you can have that exact same experience for life. When you're sitting out, when you have coherence and you go sit outside and you're looking at these gorgeous flowers and you feel the wind and the
Yep.
sun, it gives you goosebumps because
Yeah.
you have this
Yeah.
coherence that you are connected to. So that's my goal with
Love it.
somato respiratory integration. And so that is some touch, some breathing, some mantras that we speak that help to acknowledge, help to give voice to what we are experiencing and help our bodies to move through it. I also use just like somatic release techniques. So, one of my favorites is having people go out and ground in the
Mm,
grass,
mhm.
doing just some jumping and some bouncing and some wiping. One of my favorite things is just to like move energy, move gunk, and like just wipe the body off.
Yeah, so for
Um,
people that can't see us right now, you're just swiping, you're like almost like a dry brush, right? But you're using your
yes.
hand. And
Mhm.
is it important in the direction you move, in your opinion? Like start up at your shoulder, move
If you
down to
were
your hand?
Yeah, if you
Yeah.
were dry brushing, yes, we could talk about that. But
Yeah.
this specifically, the idea is like I'll just start at my face, right? And I'll like wipe my face and I'll wipe my head. And I just like to just
Mm,
pull it all down. So for me, it's head to toe. And then
I
I
love
just throw it
that.
into the grass and I throw it to
Yes.
Pachamama. And I'm like, here you go, alchemize this for me.
Yes,
You
it's so
know, and
good.
it's a really great, and the great thing is if you all are already a mom, kiddos can do this with you. They can go jump around outside and shake it out, wipe their bodies. We make some
Mhm.
sounds. And
Yeah.
it's a really great way to just shake things up. If you wake up feeling a little bit like, ugh, and then morning time is really important, I should say, because when we wake up, we have an opportunity for reset. We have an opportunity to do things differently. And
Mm,
if we don't interrupt the patterns right away, we will go into our old ways of operating, our ways that we
mm.
know. And so I think it's important to get that operating system upgraded as soon as you wake up by going outside, getting some sun on your face, doing a little bit of somatic release, some sounds, things like that,
Mm.
just to help you shift things, shift the energy, and to feel
Yes.
different. Some people like a cold shower. There's all different ways. Some people like to meditate first thing in the morning. I find I need movement. I need to shake things out. I need to get my blood flowing.
Mhm.
And so these are some different ways that I teach my patients. And I also use myself to really simple ways to just interrupt the patterns in our nervous
Oh,
system.
these are so good. These are so
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
Shaking, brushing, breathing. I mean, simple things that are
Hmm.
free.
Hmm.
It doesn't cost money.
Yep.
A couple things I wanted to ask you. Frequency of these sessions, just briefly. I know you often like to start with a couple just to kind of get the body, that reset going. Can you give us any guidance on if somebody's interested in this? Usually you have an evaluation, assessment, and then is there a standard kind of protocol for frequency, or do you like what can you share on that?
Yeah, I definitely do. So initially, like you said, we fill out this extensive paperwork,
Yep.
and then we sit down for about 45 minutes to an hour. It's usually an hour because
Yep.
we really deep dive.
Yeah.
And then from there, I do a few gentle contacts on the spine, kind of like a test run to see how your body's responding, and that gives me some insight into where we're starting. And I work in what's called a tapered model. So, if you think about how long some of these processes have been happening in the body, and one thing I should mention is that symptoms are the one of the last things to show up.
Mm.
So I one of the classic ones I love is someone comes in like, I don't know what happened, but I went down to bend down to pick up my keys and my back went out of nowhere.
Oh,
Like, okay, it could feel that way.
yeah.
But what has been happening under the surface to those structures, to
Mm.
your like what was happening in your emotional life at that time? Like, um, a lot of times they'll tell me there was something to do with relationship or their job or something. And then, there has been some weakness in the muscles that surround the spine and protect it. Maybe they were postpartum and their abs were not working well, so we kind of deep dive into that, and I help them explain that chronic illness doesn't just pop up in a moment. It's a
Mm.
journey, right, of say like type 2 diabetes. It was a journey of
Yeah.
um, sugar dysregulation that led to this piece. And so that's what I try to educate my patients on, is that
Mhm.
symptoms are the last thing. So
Mm.
it's probably going to be gladly, it's probably going to be one of the first things that may disappear. But what we have to make sure is that we are changing under the surface, because if you just go till your symptoms are gone, then you leave, did we really make the change needed and to help you be a different version of yourself so that those symptoms don't come back? And
Mm.
that's my goal for people, is to number one, help them up level and change the game so and change their nervous system so they're not doing the same patterns that got them to why they came to see me in the first place.
Yeah.
And then also to give them the strategies to see the stressors that are coming in differently so that they can interact with it differently and alchemize it differently in their life. Because when you can do that, you're pretty autonomous. You are a pretty sovereign
Mhm.
being who
Mhm.
can really navigate the world on your own.
Yeah.
And that's my goal. So my
Yeah.
number one outcome for every single person that I see is to help them be more self-sustainable, to help them be more sovereign over and educated over their own health and their family's health. And in order for me to do that, I work in a tapered model. So, tapered model means they come in depending on where they're at, most of the time, 2 times a week. I do have a couple people on 3 times a week who are in some pretty intense situations. And then as we see change and we start to meet goals that we create and see the outcomes change, we start to tailor you down to about once a week. And that can take anywhere from 3 to 6 weeks, sometimes longer. If someone's really in
Mhm.
a space that they need the extra support, then it can be longer. And then we
Mhm.
tailor down to once a week. And then once a week is usually at my hope is at least 6 months. And then after that, I usually like to give them the reins. Like I said, I want them to be in the
Yeah.
seat, in the driver's seat. And so after we've really felt like we've gotten them to a place where they're really self-regulated, where they see change the whole time before they see me again. That's a big one is, oh, I felt great for 2 hours. Okay, great. I felt great for a day. I felt great for 3 days. And you can
Mhm.
see their baseline is slowly changing over time, right? Until eventually it's like,
Mhm.
oh, I feel like when I come to see you now, I'm just up leveling instead of like needing
Mm.
you to like
Mhm.
get me back to where I was before.
Yeah.
And so those are the dialogues we see plus
Yeah.
some objective measures. But the way I explain it too is that you have to remember. I think it's really important to put this in perspective because we live in a culture that you can literally. I could go on my phone right now and order something on Amazon and have it delivered to my door later
Yeah.
today.
Instant
Like,
gratification.
right? And I see this in the health sphere. And
Yeah.
like I said, these processes are happening in our bodies. We talked about like grandma, right? Like who
Yeah.
knows how long these processes have been happening,
Right.
whether you're 20 years old or 80 years old. And it can take, 6 months in the
Mm.
snapshot of 30 years of this process happening. It's not very long time. But in our
Mm.
instant gratification world, it can feel that way. And so I try
Yeah.
to educate on that to just really see, like, because there's also a stigma in chiropractic that I found out. I've heard here in Colorado that once you're in care, like they want you to be in care for life and you're
Mm.
just, oh, don't get
Mm.
trapped. And it makes me feel really sad because
Mm.
chiropractic was designed as a preventative way to just help the brain and body connect better and to help make sure that the nerves going to the organs and all the tissues and cells of your body are operating at 100%. And
Mm.
so to feel like you get stuck in that because you think a chiropractor wants to just make money, it does make me feel really, really sad because it is a
Mm.
gorgeous modality that helps you through this crazy modern life that we are living, just up
Mhm.
level and sustain and be able
Mhm.
to function at your highest level.
Yeah.
And so, 6 months of intensive care is a really short amount of time
Okay.
when that's our goal, right?
Yeah. Oh gosh, so good. A few things that are coming to mind. So often this is not covered by insurance, correct? This technique. It's more private, just for people to know that. But it's reasonable. Like, and I've seen you. I actually want to get back and see you again.
Mm-hmm.
But a few things that are coming to mind. These tension patterns that you are working through, and are they ever completely gone? Excuse me, are there always a little bit of the tension there? Um, you can't completely get rid of the tension patterns, correct?
Absolutely. And the reason for that is because you're alive.
Yeah. Yeah. We need
If
some tension patterns
you have
to
to,
keep us safe and alive. Yeah.
you absolutely have to. That is the dynamic of being a alive, breathing human being.
Hmm.
If there
Hmm.
were zero tension patterns in the body, zero, then we would probably actually not be alive.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
so there has to be some level of that. And the goal is that we don't get stuck,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? That's where a lot of us are. I have to say there is this crazy thing happening with a lot of people where their rib cages, the rib cages that I'm seeing are just locked. And as you
Wow.
remember, the fight or those sympathetic nervous system, that's where it runs, is down the rib cage, right? So I
Hmm.
see a lot of stuckness. And this isn't just like today. This is like when I feel it, it's like this has been here. I don't even know if your body remembers what rib cage movement
Wow.
feels like, kind of intensity.
Mm,
And so the goal is yes, there's always going to be tension. It is never the goal to release all tension, because
right.
we would either be just these like sentient beings or we wouldn't be alive.
Right.
But the goal is to not get stuck, right? So what I
Yeah.
help people do is have more resilient,
Yes.
adaptable nervous systems and flexible nervous systems, that if we do notice a tension pattern, either one entrainment in my office, or just some shaking and some sounds or some SRI can help them move through that on their own. So that's really the goal, is can we move
Yeah.
these things and not get stuck in one perspective.
That is so key, Dr. Shea, like resilient, adaptive nervous systems. And I talk about how fertility challenges are often like riding a wave. We're riding this wave and the highs and the lows, and being able to navigate through these. This is the key, because yes, fertility challenges are one challenge in our life. And then we're going to have challenges, as you know, in motherhood and beyond. And so it is these techniques and tools through what you do, through what I do, like what we're here to help women be able to kind of move through, navigate through the different stressors in our life, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
You shared a story with me that really stood out. I just want you to touch upon it briefly. Some gentleman you helped who was going through years of therapy, and he had a session or two with you that shifted and changed his life. Do you remember telling me about that?
Let me
It was a
think.
client that had been going to therapy for so
Mm-hmm.
long.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, I felt called to ask you that about that, because I think
Mm-hmm.
these shifts and changes can happen pretty quickly when we get to this root level nervous system healing.
Mm-hmm.
It's not talk therapy, although we do talk in some of our sessions, but
Yeah, we
right. I mean,
absolutely do.
we're
Yep.
talking, but it's you're sensing into the body. I mean, it's a different form of a healing modality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I've have a lot of those stories. And it's not to put down, what I want to highlight is it's not to put down talk therapy, because I think
No.
it's imperative, and has helped me navigate a lot of challenges in my life and in my
And
relationship,
me
my
as well.
husband and I,
Yes.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And there is also a reason why a lot of therapists are looking into some somatic modalities to do alongside with therapy, with talk therapy.
Mm-hmm.
And I do have to say, yeah, I think the gentleman you're speaking to, I do know who you're referring to. And um, I think that's why he saw the results that he saw, was because he had done a lot of work in his mind and was really able to hold the perspective change and really hold and be ready for what was going to change in his body,
Mm-hmm.
and in his emotional system. Like, he was able to actually experience emotion differently because he'd worked with that with his therapist. So I think because of that, the somatic piece was just like, oh, thank you. And there was
Mm-hmm.
this really quick turnaround. And I do find that the people who are doing both have really, really beautiful and quick results,
Mm-hmm.
because they
Mm-hmm.
have that support mentally to help them work through what's coming up.
Yeah. So good. Um, we didn't really get to touch upon your motherhood journey. I know we chatted about it in the beginning, but can you share a little bit? I didn't know that you had gone through a personal loss,
Mm-hmm.
until I was reading more of your bio and more in depth. And I invite you to share whatever you feel called to share. You know, speaking
Mm-hmm.
to the women who are listening to this podcast, many are navigating through fertility challenges. Many have experienced loss. Many want to be a mom. You've understood that path as far as not IVF specifically, but
Mm-hmm.
going through loss and healing, to reach two of your little ones that you have now. So,
Yeah.
yeah, what can you open up to us about that?
Yeah. So yeah, I first got pregnant in end of 2017, and I had a really healthy pregnancy, and everything was very normal, very okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I went into labor, and had a long, but as a lot of first time labors are, long, but very normal first birth. But when my daughter came out, she didn't look really all that great. And, her coloring and her shape of her head, and um, the midwives on staff were hustling around, and I was really confused about what was going on. And one thing I remember though is, as she was crowning, before you could even see her, my husband, who was like right by my side, just dropped to the ground and started screaming and crying. And I was like, what is, like, there was just so much, like, everyone, if you have experienced birth, like, it's that moment, you're just like, what is happening? And
I
there
didn't know
was
you had a stillborn birth.
she wasn't a stillborn, Soren, so she
Oh,
was alive.
oh,
And yeah, and so we had her rushed to the NICU,
oh.
and she was separated from me, and my husband went with her. And she we later found out, we didn't even know for months, actually, until I got pregnant with my son, what had actually happened. So we really didn't have like a ton of answers. But all we knew was that, like, she wasn't doing well. So they rushed her to the NICU, and she was um, linked up to everything. And what they came to the conclusion in that moment was that she had brain swelling,
Mm.
and the brain swelling was just too much. And so they were going to do some invasive stuff to maybe help keep her alive. But they basically said, like, she's going to maybe not be able to ever walk or feed herself,
Oh,
and just like won't maybe not even leave the hospital. And that's what the neurologist told us. And so we just took a moment together and decided that that just wasn't what we felt was the best decision for her. And that was if she actually survived this invasive
mm.
process of, like, yeah, bypassing her heart and doing all this stuff. And so my husband and I just decided we were just going to let her pass peacefully. And
Mm.
yeah, and I have to say, now looking back, my experience in the moment was extremely spiritual, and I think that's what has helped me
Mm.
get through um, what happened, because we had our birth team, my parents, my in-laws, my best friends, all on the roof of, we were in the Bay Area, so Lucille Packard Hospital, which was
Mm.
the most amazing experience I've ever had with healthcare
Mm.
professionals. I have to say, they were like the most incredible human beings. Up on the nurses were up on the rooftop in tears with us, and so
Oh
we just all were in a circle and just saying prayers, and were with her, and I got to hold her while she passed. And
my gosh.
it was a really, really intense experience that I just came out of nowhere. What felt like, we're just talking about symptoms coming out of nowhere, but this really did blindside us. With this healthy pregnancy, everything seemed fine.
Wow.
And even during birth, nothing really seemed to have a red flag. And so, yeah, it was a really intense experience. And I just remember 2 days after birth, um, waking up, feeling in my body again, and
Mm.
having the real human experience of
Mm.
losing a child, and having the most intense grief in my body that I could have ever imagined experiencing, and really had to work through that.
Oh wow.
And it took some time, but one of the things that takeaways, and especially for moms listening or women listening who have had losses, who are afraid to have a loss in motherhood journey, um, one of the things, and this, I don't think this sounds harsh, but I think it's what I realized was, number one, when you decide that you want to embark on this journey of motherhood, however it looks for you, you have to be open and knowing that we're not in control, and that we sign up for all of it.
Mm.
Right. And I did realize that, like, I can't just sign up for the good stuff in motherhood. I have to
Mm.
sign up for all of it and show up for all of it. And so that was a big learning lesson for me.
Mm.
And also having a spiritual connection and having community. And if you don't have direct community, there are resources. There are people out there. You can reach out to me. I have many doulas and healthcare
Mhm.
practitioners who know my story and
Yeah.
know what an advocate I have become and support system I have become for women of loss and parents of
Mm.
loss, that
Mhm.
I get sent people all the time. I actually just had this beautiful um, woman who reached out to me, who had the same name as our daughters had the same name, and she had a loss. And unbelievable, just the synchronicities that can
Wow.
happen.
Yeah.
But yeah, community and a spiritual connection to this little one's soul has really helped a lot. And talking
Mm.
about it, so I have two little boys, 4.5 and 1.5. And my 4.5 knows, my daughter's name was Sage, and
Mm.
he knows that it was his sister.
Mm.
There's pictures of her around the house that we could get, a lot of them, she has breathing tubes and they're not beautiful. Like, I mean, she's beautiful, but they're
Yeah.
not the most perfect photos. But we have
Mm.
them around the house. We just had her birthday on the 24th of August. And so we
Oh,
we bake cupcakes every year with purple frosting, and she's a part of our life. And we talk about her. So that feels really, really wonderful to me, to have my boys
wow.
know that she
Yeah.
was there and she's looking out for us. Um,
I'm
and
crying over here.
recently,
Sorry.
I know,
It's so sweet.
and
It's so
recently
amazing.
they started wanting to carry a stuffed animal around and calling her Sage, and so they bring her to the park and they put her on the
Wow.
swing, and
Oh my gosh.
um, it's endless in the ways that you can integrate these babies into your life,
Yeah.
whether they were miscarriages, whether they were, just like failed
Yeah.
IVF experiences. Like, they, if you believe that they had some sort of
Yeah.
energetic, soul in them, we can really integrate them into our lives in a way
Mm.
that feels whole. And to welcome the
Wow.
grief, right? I think the
Yeah.
last piece that I want to just mention, that was the
Yeah.
best advice I ever got, was, you're not, it doesn't end when you stop grieving the moment of when it happened. And I think this goes along with miscarriage and all the other pieces as well, is you're going to, if it's a miscarriage, you're going to grieve the due date. You're going to grieve the first birthday. You're going to grieve the 10th birthday. You're going
Hmm.
to grieve the first everything. You're
Yep.
going to grieve when you do have a little one and you think about having that other one with, there. Like, I go to the park and I see my boys and I wish that Sage was with them, and I think about
Mm.
her and all of that. And so I think it's important to recognize that grief doesn't end because you got over the actual event. It blindsides you in ways that you can't be ready for. And,
That's really powerful.
yeah.
That's really good. I did not know you'd gone through all that.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing. Getting to have a few days with her.
Hmm. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I just think the work you're doing is so powerful and profound. It's, transforming lives. Like, I'm grateful that we're connected and that you've supported me. And I have clients that I know I've sent people your way. And I think, just supporting one another. Thank you for passing along my book and,
Hmm.
being open to learning about what I do. It's like, this is where it's at: community and support and healing. Like, you're doing really incredible work. And I will link everything below. Do you want to share how people can connect with you if they'd like to reach out and learn more? Your website
Yeah.
or any other links?
I will invite, if there's any women just like going through loss that like need help navigating, no strings attached. They can, message me on my Instagram page,
Mm.
which is vertically sourced underscore mama. Um, and they can also go on there for just really great educational pieces about the nervous system. And then if anyone's interested in just chatting, having a discovery call, it's free, literally no strings attached. I don't sell anything. I just get to know you and see if we're a good fit. They can go on my website, verticallysourced.info. And that will have, there's a book now, and they can book a discovery call, and we can
Hmm.
just sit down and have a chat. So those are really the best ways to connect.
So beautiful. How did you come up with vertically sourced? What's the inspiration behind that?
Yeah. So what I really believe is the spine is a conduit between
Mm.
our earth and our, and bigger power.
Mm.
And so I think about what I really try to do in my practice is help people become vertically sourced, where they're no
Mm.
longer horizontally sourced by, we love
Mm.
our coffee, but like with coffee and alcohol and other people
Yeah.
and successes and all the things that we source
Yeah.
from, right? Where what if we
Mm.
could be this channel where we could be vertically sourced with endless power from the universe and really connected to our mother, which is our earth, who we are,
Yeah.
made of.
Yeah.
And so that's really what vertically sourcing is all about.
Ah. Thank you for explaining that.
Mhm.
I love it. Yeah. Let's connect with the higher powers that be, right?
Mhm.
That's so beautiful. Thank you. This has
Yeah.
been an incredible conversation. Like I've learned so much. I know others are going to hopefully explore what this
Mhm.
treatment is all about. So thank you for being here. You're amazing.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Of course.